Hello, folks. I'm Trev Makes It Easy, the channel where we make learning easy. In this series, Trev on Econ, I'll be taking you through topics you're likely to run into in any introductory course in economics at the college or university level. My goal is to make economics less scary, more approachable, and, if I can, mildly enjoyable. With that being said, let's make it easy. All right, folks, let's get started. Today we're going to tackle the calculation side of consumer and producer surplus. On top of that, we're going to talk about some niche cases where we're not in maybe the best position and how we're going to deal with that. We're going to use a lot of, grade 5 geometry, but we're going to revisit some formulas you might not have seen in a while. So you'll see on my screen, I've basically got our standard supply and demand set up like we normally do. Now, if we're lucky, we're going to just be at equilibrium. Again, that's where the market basically wants to go. So with any luck, we should end up with a price and quantity like so. And we're going to give it a number today. We're going to call it $5 because that's an easy number. And we're going to say 10 units because that's also fairly easy to work with, right? And if we know where equilibrium is, or we know what point we are at, as we'll see later, we can calculate consumer and producer surplus. And this is a completely reasonable thing to see on tests, especially at the intro level. So the nice thing is even though we've thrown it all together now, we can start to see where everything is. Now, as a quick reminder, if you haven't seen last video, we do not care about anything in this zone, this zone, this zone, or this zone. Everything we do is in this triangle over here. All right. Again, in more advanced things, there are other cases where that's not true. But for the introduction, we're going to keep it into those zones. Now, as a reminder, we first need to find out where the two surpluses are. So consumer surplus, that's the one that's near demand. So it's always going to be on the top up here. And then producer surplus is on the bottom. It is always going to be down here. Now, the order will always be the same, CS on top, PS on the bottom. However, their shapes may change, and that's what we're going to see in the more difficult examples later. So from here, we basically need some information. Namely, the question is going to have to give us some extra numbers that maybe we don't have yet. So for examples, they might have 0 down here, just to tell us that is 0. Then they might have up here, I'm just going to pick 10 because, again, that's a nice easy number to work with. All right. And from here, we can use some basic algebra and basic geometry to solve for the area, because we essentially need to know, well, how big is the consumer surplus? So let's start with that question. Well, the first thing is, notice it is a triangle, right? So right away, we take ourselves all the way back to, grade 4, grade 5 maybe, and we say, oh, well, what is the area of a triangle? Because that's effectively what we are doing. Now, again, it might have been a long time for some of you, so I'm going to spell it out for you. But remember, triangles are base times height, all divided by 2. Okay, so we are going to go back to using a nice simple formula like that. Now, the thing is, it doesn't really matter what you call base and what you call height. Basically, just pick 2 sides of the triangle that you can figure out. So, for example, for consumer surplus, I can tell you the size of this side is 10 because it's from 0 to 10. So let's call that its base. And then its height, well, the height is from here to here. Now be careful, some people reactionary? They quickly basically look at this and say, oh, well, it must be a height of 10. But just be careful, obviously it's starting at 5 and going to 10. So it's not a height of 10, it's only a height of 5. So we do 10 times 5, and then divide by 2 because it's a triangle, and this would give me 50 over 2, which is $25. Okay, consumer surplus is measured in dollars. Most teachers won't take marks off for that, but it's good to at least have. All right. And we can continue that. We'll do the same thing and we do how big is the producer surplus. Well, it's the same idea, right? So for this one, obviously the triangle is flipped, so sometimes that throws people off, but we again have the base, or you can call this whatever you want, of 10. We also have the height, which in this case is again 5. So we actually have the exact same, and that's the problem with choosing easy numbers, is you have 5 times 10 divided by 2, and it's the exact same. Now, it does not have to be the exact same, okay? This just happens because of the numbers I made up for this. They could be different, all right? But at the end of the day, we're just finding out what is the size of the triangle, what is the area of the triangle. Now, the final thing you might be asked is, well, what is the economic surplus? Now, this was a small topic we did near the end of the last video, but economic surplus is the sum of consumer plus producer. So we can say consumer surplus plus producer surplus equals economic surplus, which for us would be $25 plus $25 equals $50. So we have $50 of economic surplus. And because we're at equilibrium, we know this is efficient. Because remember, our definition of efficient was, are we filling out this entire triangle? And for our purposes, yes. Some of it goes to consumer, some of it goes to producer, but there's no lost or empty space here in this triangle. We're going to see that's not the case when we deal with a situation where we're not at equilibrium. All right? So let's try that now. Not at equilibrium is definitely more complicated. Okay, it takes a lot more care. So we're going to start from the same picture, but this time I'm going to say the price is somewhere up here. Okay, oops, get that nice and straight. Perfect. Okay, and we're going to call this, I don't know, $8. Well, we know from past videos and past lessons that when we have situations like this, we're hitting demand and supply at different times, right? In fact, if you go all the way back to like supply and demand chapter that we did, this is effectively a surplus, right? Too much supply, not enough demand. The problem is, whatever curve we hit first is going to dictate how much we can sell and buy. So if I only want to buy, let's say, 3, let's say 4, okay, and I want to sell 8, well, it doesn't matter that I want to sell 8 because only 4 are being bought, so 4 would just get wasted. So we really only care about the first curve we hit. So I don't really care about that supply line, that line hitting supply. That doesn't tell me much because it just will never happen. Now, what you might notice is we've divided up the triangle in a bit of a different way. There's still a triangle up here, but now there's this weird quadrilateral down here, 4-sided shape. Then there's another side triangle over here, and then, some other random areas cut up. A lot of the rules stay the same. First big rule, again, none of these areas matter for us, okay? We are going to handle everything within the triangle on the left, right? So what we need is we need some numbers, okay? Because we need to find the areas of these 3 things and also understand what these 3 things are exactly. So first things first, let's give some numbers. Again, we're going to call this 10, just to kind of stay similar to our old example. We're going to then still mark out the equilibrium. Again, on a test, this would probably be given, but depends on your teacher. And we'll use the same numbers even. We'll say, okay, this is 5, I think we used, and 10. Okay. And you're thinking to yourself, Trevor, all you've done is made this more complex. Okay, and that's kind of true. They would probably have to give you one more number, and that would be right here, right? And we'll call this the number 2. Now, again, there are some mathematical ways to do this, but that would take a very long time to get to. So we are going to act like you already have all these numbers, okay? Because, again, the main focus is, well, what areas are consumer, what areas are producer, and what else do we have, right? So right away, we can start with, well, what parts are consumer surplus, what's producer surplus, what's neither of those things? Well, first off, remember, the rules still apply, okay? Our rule for consumer surplus is it's the area between the demand curve, the green curve, and the market price, this kind of purple curve, as long as demand is higher. So if you notice, this little triangle up here, that's my consumer surplus, right? It's still a triangle, which is nice, but it's a lot smaller than it was. Producer surplus is weird because producer surplus is not nearly as easy. Remember, producer surplus is there between the market line, the price, and the supply curve. But we can't go past this barrier. This is kind of limiting quantity. That's the name I've always called it. I don't know if that's the technical name. But basically, I can follow the supply curve up to here, but then I basically hit a wall. So I end up with, bang, 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 these 3 areas are all part of producer surplus. Now, notice PS or CS and PS no longer fill out the entire triangle, right? We now have this blank area, these 2 blank triangles that basically aren't being taken up by anyone. This lost area is called dead weight loss, or DWL, as you'll often see. This is surplus that someone could have gotten, but it is missed out on because the price isn't correct, i.e. it's not at equilibrium, right? So because we have a price that's effectively too high in this case, what we end up with is, oh no, we've actually lost some benefit that could have gone to someone, producer or consumer, and because of that, as soon as we see a DWL, we are not being efficient. There is literally lost area that someone could have captured, but because of the circumstances, it's gone. I'm going to code this as yellow. Hopefully that kind of reads on your screen, but we're just going to put DWL, DWL. Now again, at the end of the day, it's still everything contained to this left triangle. All right. Do not get outside of there unless you're doing a more advanced course. Now the fun part. What about the math? Okay, so let's do them in chunks. Consumer surplus is not that bad because it's still a triangle. So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to find its base, its height, it's divided by 2. So its base is from here to here, which is 0 to 4. So we've got a base of 4 multiplied by a height of, in this case, 2, divide by 2, and you can trust me on this, it's $4. Okay? Not too bad. Again, just a smaller triangle, still the same method we'd been using before. Producer surplus is a different beast. Okay? It is a weird quadrilateral. I think that's how you spell that word. Quadrilateral, probably. Quadrilateral. Okay? Meaning, it's a weird 4-sided shape that we don't have a formula for. There's no formula that I'm aware of that would tell you the area of this weird shape here. So what we're going to do is go back again to elementary school. And what we did in, younger school is when we had a complex shape like this, we broke it down into pieces. Okay. So I'm going to call this PS1, 2, and 3. And what we're effectively going to do is we need to add up P1 plus P2 plus P3. Which means we can break it down into pieces and then add them up and get the total area. Now, are there faster ways to do this? Absolutely. We're going to take it slow just again to make sure we get it right. Accuracy beats speed every time here. So PS1, well, it's a square. So remember, squares, or rectangles in this case, are length times width. So we have a width of 4 and a height of 3. 8 minus 5 is 3. 0 to 4 is 4. So for P1, we're going to have 3 times 4. Plus, well, let's look at P2. P2 is from 2 to 5, that's 3 again. 0 to 4, that's 4. So it's actually the same number, 3 times 4. And then P3, well, P3 is a triangle, so its base is 4, right? It's 4 from here to here. Times height. Its height is 2 from 0 to 2. Right? And again, don't forget we need to divide by 2. So what we end up with, scroll it down a little bit, is 3 times 4 is 12, plus 3 times 4 is 12, plus 4 times 2 is 8, divided by 2 is 4. So we're going to get $28 for producer surplus, right? And then finally, we have our last one, which I will not do in yellow because you will not be able to read that. We need to find out deadweight loss. And it is also a triangle, right? It's also a triangle, which is handy. So we just have to be a little careful. Base times height. The base is actually this piece technically. It doesn't really matter. And the height is this piece here. So our base is from 2 up to 8, which is 6. Times a height of 4 to 10, which is 6, and then we'll divide by 2. So 6 times 6 is 36, divided by 2 is 18, and we are done. We've found out all our areas. Now, fun little thing is that if you remember, this is the exact same diagram we used for the first one, and it had an economic surplus of 50. If we add up these areas, $4 plus 28 plus 18, we get $50. So that's a pretty good way to know we've done it right. Now, will that be necessary all the time? Probably not, but it's a handy way to kind of make sure you've done it right. Now, last thing I'm going to quickly show you, we're not going to do the math for it, but the other case we could run into is, well, what happens if the price is too low? So here the price was high. If the price is low, we basically do the exact same thing mathematically. It's just the consumer and the producer surplus, those will switch. So let's just quickly draw it out so you can get a visual. Again, you would have a low price like so. I'm not even going to add numbers. Low price like so. We need to mark off that limiting quantity. So supply is the first curve we hit. So I'm just going to go a line right up the middle of that. And then hopefully you can see we've got our consumer, we've got our producer, and we've got our deadweight loss. And in terms of calculation, it would be the same thing we just did, but you'd have to put more work into consumer as opposed to producer in this case, right? So that wraps up calculating consumer and producer surplus. What we're going to focus on next time is how do governments basically implement systems like this with prices that are too high or too low, and look at things like price floors, price ceilings, and other government intervention methods to try and make a difference in the market. I hope this was informative. It's more of a mathematical one, so it can be a little tricky. Make sure you spend time on it, especially if numbers are not your strong suit. Other than that, I hope you're all doing well. Take care. Bye-bye.
Well, folks, that wraps up another lesson for today. I hope it was helpful. If you found the video valuable, please make sure to like and subscribe. And if you have any questions about the content or requests for other topics or subjects you'd like me to cover, please leave a comment below. Until next time, keep learning and make it easy.